Okay, welcome back to Inspire, life and leadership conversations that go deeper with Steve and Drew. And we are going to try to land the plane today on the 10th and final episode of season one. And just a reminder, the acronym INSPIRE is identity, which we're going to kind of close or hopefully land the plane on identity today. And then N is for navigate. And it's going to be basically taking what we've learned in identity to help us point the way to navigate through life. Then the S is spiritual. P is for physical, diet, exercise, sleep, all that. I is for intellectual. R is for relational, and E is for emotion. So we're gonna keep going a season for each. And welcome, Steve. You
Hi,
ready?
Drew. How are you?
Great.
Good. Me too. Me
Okay.
too.
So we're gonna see how we do on this closing. And anything we need to shore up, will show up and shore up in the next season.
I've
So
landed a
yeah.
plane before, so I think we're okay.
Okay. Well, good. So today's idea is kind of the core message is your identity is not what you do, what you achieve, or what others think of you. It is the unchanging truth of who you are. Your belovedness, your wholeness, your inherent worth, um, and it's expressed through discovery of the doing part of identity. And so we'll get into that. The I guess I wanted to start with a little bit of the being and the doing tension. We spend our whole lives kind of building an identity, and that identity is usually tied up to our false identities. I need to be rational, like the hyper rational saboteur we talked about. I need to achieve. I need to have a title, and the title can be chief engineer, it can be doctor, it can be, all these different titles. And we get wrapped up, I think, in linking those to our identity instead of our identity being the being part of our identity, that inherent worth,
Right,
or the doing part of our identity, which is how we live out our being of our identity.
right, right. More of how the world defines us versus how we've defined ourselves, how they see us versus how we see ourselves. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And well said. Yeah. It's the idea of we're trying to, and we'll talk about this and navigate again, is living from inside out, from being aware of our inherent worth and living out of that versus living outside in, which is our identity comes from outside, from what Steve thinks of me, from what X, Y, and Z.
Right.
Um, and then the being and doing I saw is like the being of our identity is who you are at your unchanging core. And the doing of your identity is how you express and discover that core. So I love those two definitions.
I do too.
And I think
I
that's
love
kind of what we're kind of summarizing or discussing today in preparation for next season, which is how to navigate with all this stuff we've learned
Yep, yep,
so that we make good decisions and so we have influence and so that we are have a meaningful life. And I think it starts, the foundation is going to be identity.
yeah. I agree. It certainly drives your maximizing your fulfillment, if you will, and getting rid of the anxiety. You go to bed every night knowing, hey, I lived my purpose today, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. And, I think our world, and I know so many friends and clients that are in an identity crisis.
yeah,
They live and breathe this identity crisis, sometimes without even acknowledging it until they lose their job or they retire. I mean, a
yeah,
lot of my friends and people I know are retiring, and it's like that cliff of,
yeah,
oh my gosh, I am a doctor and my identity is tied up in being a doctor. So if I retire, what's going to happen to me? Or I
right,
just that, and I think not only, I think the other things that this identity crisis cost us are burnout. We get burned out because we're
yeah,
tied up. I've got to be a,
yeah,
perfect doctor, a perfect
yeah,
whatever. Imposter syndrome.
yep,
retirement and job loss crisis, like I talked about, perfectionism. My worth is around performance, around being perfect,
Right.
and fill in the blank for that. My worth is based on whatever false identity I'm living through. And then, yeah, I
You and
think
I,
yeah.
I mean, you triggered a couple things with me. One, um, you and I had worked together several years before I retired, so I felt I felt good going into retirement that I knew who I was before I retired and my job didn't define me.
Hmm.
I still felt like I went off that cliff a little bit when I retired, of really rediscovering, who Steve is, what's he really all about. So even those people who are going into it thinking, yeah, I got this thing, you know, be forewarned that you got to really be solid in who you are. I think that to me is key. The other thing that you hit on that I used to do and that you helped me with so much was, that my false identity, I would should on myself all the time. And you pointed out to me I can't remember how many sessions you and I had, but Steve, you're shitting on yourself again. Steve, you're shitting on yourself again. Because I should
Well,
get this done, I should get that done, and it wasn't happening, right? And
yeah,
I should have
yeah.
gone home and just been happy with who I am and done the best job I could of the day, right? So I
And
just
I
shouldn't.
think that's so well said, but I think the only tweak I'd say is who's shooting on us?
Right.
Because I think it's that brain chemical pathway we've talked
Yep.
about, right? It's
Yep.
the fill in the blank. My hyperrational is shooting on me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then our true self, our true identity, I don't think there's a should in there.
Correct. Yeah.
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 Which is such
Yeah.
a wow. Yeah.
The true identity knows who we are, knows what we can accomplish, and knows that we've done our best at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. And I think that the identity tied up in the role, there's some things you can start now to frame up a little bit. For example, instead of saying I am a fill in the blank,
Right.
engineer, doctor, whatever,
Right.
I practice medicine.
Right.
It sounds like, oh, but those are subtle shifts that we can start to make as we process this, is that the role is not linked to we are not our role. Our role is not our identity.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. Love that.
Um, and then the other one is our identity is not linked to achievement and performance, right? And that's all tied up with those false identities.
Yeah, I
Um,
agree.
yeah.
And it, we identify that way. We also identify with all the stuff, right? I've got this car, I've got this house, I've got this. It builds that false identity of who we are. And they're, I don't know, material possessions, they can go away at any time, right? And when they do, that shouldn't change our identity of who we are, um, who our
I,
core being
I remember a sermon, I think the title was It All Goes Back in the Box.
is.
And, and
what
it's
what
just
box are we talking about?
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a nice dual meaning metaphor, but all the stuff that we have, I mean, it's not, I think, bad to like shiny objects and, we get joy from them, but
Yep.
the other concept in certain faith traditions is we all worship something.
Yeah.
We all have idols, and
Yep.
whatever we worship defines how we show up. And if we're worshiping stuff, then that's taking us away from who we truly are supposed to
Right.
be.
Right. And
Yeah.
what saboteurs do we have inside of ourselves that are getting us to worship that stuff? I mean, that's an interesting.
Well, and I
Yeah.
think that's a good call out for the hyperachiever, which
Yeah.
so many of us are, is that hyperachiever is I've got to achieve and I'm terrified of looking like I'm a failure. So
Right.
therefore, let me show you what success looks like. And one of the ways to show the culture success is to be, I don't know, famous, to drive a fancy car, to have stuff, big house, all that. Maybe that's where that comes from.
Could very well be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, The other things are our identity is not what others think of us.
Yeah.
how often does that show up, right? That we are so worried about what people think about us.
Yeah, I've got a little bit of that going on right now. I don't want to go too much detail, but I'm perceived right now in an organization I'm working and volunteering in as this, structured, very structured engineer. And I can't tell you how much feedback I got from my management about Steve, you need more structure. You're always going off in directions. You gotta pull this thing back in. But the perception of me when I'm working with this next group is that, I'm the super structured one. So it's like, wow, okay. Because you got the word engineer in your title, you're assumed to be incredibly structured. And I've learned how to be structured, but that's not where I naturally come from. That would be some type of a hyper rational saboteur of me being structured versus who I really am.
Well, it also brings up imposter syndrome, right? It's like
Yeah,
you feel a little bit like I have an identity to perform to. Like
yeah,
I'm being called out as the structured guy.
yeah.
So, oh my gosh, if they find out, or oh, or what if I actually have to show them I'm not, or I mean, that's all that
Yeah,
imposter. Wow, yeah,
yeah.
interesting.
I I have no fear of that. I have no fear of that.
Yeah,
That
so
doesn't bother me a bit. In fact, I've got to figure out how to break that down so they can figure out who the real Steve is. But yeah, 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 yeah.
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 And how often wouldn't we be better in our leadership and our relationships if we were just saying, okay, I'm pretty clear on the real Steve, so I'm going to run with that.
Yeah,
And, it leads to less of the imposter syndrome, I think.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Um, Identity is not our past mistakes.
Yeah. Nope.
That whole concept we're going to talk about as part of the foundation of navigating the world is self-compassion.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
have to, so, a little side note, I actually, after 58 years, caught myself when I did something wrong, calling myself honey. And I was like, did that just happen? Because normally the voice in my head is saying, you idiot. And it was like the first time I was like, honey, that's okay, was what the phrase was. And I was like,
Wow.
wow, 58 years.
That's impressive though. That's really
Well,
good.
yeah, it's a one-off, I think, but it was pretty great.
I I mean, as you know, I'm a golfer, and I've listened to a couple of psychology books on golf, and one of them, the doctor says, talk to yourself like you talk to your 6-year-old daughter. So when you say, "Honey, that's okay," that's exactly what that evokes in me. Is you're talking to yourself politely like your 6-year-old daughter, trying to coach her, trying to build her, trying to strengthen her, trying to motivate her, trying to, help her in every way she can. And it would be so cool if we all had our inner voice talking to us in that way instead of, the heavy judge coming down with a gavel every time we screwed up, right?
Well, but I think the truth is that there is a voice in our neurochemistry and in our spiritual life that is saying that to us.
Yeah.
We just can't hear it.
It's deafened by the sound of the gavel. Boom, boom. Yeah. Yep.
It is, right?
Yep.
And it's also neurochemically deafened by our, negative bias. That's where all this stuff comes from. To survive, we've got to make sure it's a tiger and not a butterfly.
Right.
But there's a lot, so I think it's important to recognize where the voice is coming from, and then, yeah, maybe start. I mean, maybe part of the process in my own life has gotten from I've gone from Spock to professor in
Yeah.
re-imaging my hyper-rational saboteur or false identity. And that has helped me soften it so that when it shows up, I'm trying honey instead of you idiot.
I love it. I love it.
Uh, um, the last one of the what our identity is not that I want to call out is our identity is not our current circumstances.
Yeah. 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 Huge.
Yeah.
Huge.
So if all of those things that we just talked are not our identity are all stripped away. Our role, our achievement, our approval, our past, our circumstances, what's left? That's our identity.
Right, right.
Yeah.
That core self,
Yeah.
core true self.
And we've different terms, but the belovedness, our wholeness, our inherent worthiness, our self-worth, all of those things remain at the core.
Yeah.
Um, so a touch on the being, and then we'll kind of tie it into the doing, which you've already done, but just the idea of the being part of our identity is that unchanging core.
Yeah.
And you and I are from, Christian faith, so we probably both define it as a beloved child of God,
Yeah.
and our worth comes from that space.
Yeah.
Um, Thoughts on that?
Of who we are. Yeah, that was actually took the time and wrote down again, who I am. But one of the things that, I wrote down. I started with a believer in Jesus Christ. Um, so that's part of who I am. But then I also wrote down, wise, experienced in leadership, experienced in engineering. Um, I think I bring a positive spirit, and I bring pragmatism, and I bring compassion. I think that if you define Steve, those are things that would define Steve's true core. Um, and you and I were talking about this, and I think those other things, that experiences and negativity that we've experienced in our life, are used really to strengthen that core. And when we can live from that core and strengthen from that core and strengthen from those experiences, I think that becomes huge for us. Instead of being those experiences, being those things, we learn from it, and it strengthens our inner core. Um,
And the part that, if I'm allowed to lean in, which you always say yes, but that I wanted to call out is some of that's doing,
yeah,
and to be
yeah,
mindful that they're integrated, but the being part is that simple core of I'm resting in God's arms, or
yeah,
I mean, whatever the
yeah,
metaphor, but it's just that belovedness
yeah,
piece. And if you're not a believer or you're from a different faith walk, then you've got to kind of define that being piece.
yeah,
If you're not a believer of anything, then you technically would be still probably acknowledge that based on what we know of science, your DNA is unique
yeah,
and there's no one else that's ever been on the planet like you. So that's uniqueness. And that's a sense of
yeah,
your being is that unique, never to be seen again entity.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for calling that out. I can get caught up in the doing very very
Well, it's
quickly.
such a great illustration of what we do.
Yeah,
I immediately go to all the stuff we've talked about identity. We
yeah,
focused a lot on, my I am statement, that idea of
yeah,
I am, playful or whimsical or inspirational or, all those values that I want to try to
yeah,
show up as. Those are still all doing.
yeah,
There's
yeah,
a simplicity, a break. If you really break it down, it's like, you know, I am nothing more. My core is I am a child of God,
yeah,
or I am a unique combination of DNA, whatever you
yeah,
want to do it. But that's the core. There's just being in that. It's
yeah,
just sitting in that. And
yeah,
I think that goes to this exercise that we were talking about. And I was probably too, don't want to make this too woo-woo for people, but you actually, of course, did it because I just love you that you're so
yeah.
experiential. Can you unpack what you did and how that was for you?
Hold on, I got to go back to my notes to get that one.
It was
Um,
this practicing the being part of our identity. And it was placing your hand on your
Hand on
heart.
your heart. Yep,
Yeah.
yep.
Taking 3 deep breaths. And
I'm
then,
doing it. You coach me through it. I'm doing it.
okay, take 3 deep breaths and then say internally, I am here.
I am here. Oh, so internally.
I am whole and I am enough.
Yeah, the when I did that, there's just a warmth that comes over you. when you do it. There's just a reassurance and a warmth that came over my body. Um, and it was it's something that you will get into later, but something I want to start practicing in the morning when I get up.
Mm,
You know that I've always struggled with not enough. So when I get to that last statement, that not enough, that warmth and that fulfillment, it's almost it's emotional.
mm,
Um, it really, I don't know, evokes a sense of wholeness.
mm,
Evokes a sense of forgiveness. It evokes a sense of um, I don't being enough is it doesn't fit it, but it just it binds. It feels like it binds everything together and gives you just this wonderful peace um, that I loved about that, and it's something I want to start inputting into my life. Um, yeah, it's really
So
cool.
for my daughter and the three other people listening, we're done. We're done for today. Steve has just dropped the mic. Um, and I guess so beautifully said. I'm just, it's so it that this is the muscle that I think is weak and atrophied in our world. And if we can do what you just calling out that you want to do is just sit in stillness for
Yeah,
a minute or two every morning and just, hug ourselves and say, we're enough.
yeah,
And we can just rest in that. A big theologian guy that I've always loved, Brennan Manning, he had this breath prayer that he would practice. And it would be breathe in Abba, which is
yeah.
I think Hebrew term for daddy,
Yep.
um, and breathe out, I belong to you,
Oh,
which
cool.
fits perfectly with your inspiration rhythm, which is usually shorter than your expiration.
Right.
But I'm almost challenged today to think, breathe in Abba, your
Yeah.
Father God, and then breathe out, I rest in your arms.
Oh, I love that.
And I don't think there's anything more. That's the core of the being part, unless,
Yeah.
of course, you can redesign that breath prayer to something that fits your, whatever your spiritual walk is. But
Yeah.
I think we don't do enough of this. We get tied up in the identity being something it's not, and we even I tied up in the identity being all the doing.
Right.
And
Right.
it's okay just to sit every day. And maybe that's the call out for today is just sit for a second or a minute or a few minutes in stillness and say, whatever you need to say to get yourself grounded in it's okay just to be who you are and nothing more to it. That's your identity, your worthiness.
Yeah. I don't know about you, but for me in the morning, even being retired, my mind shifts into, well, this is what I got to get done today when I wake up instead of just taking that time and, you know, taking in a little sunshine, taking a deep breath, knowing that I woke up today, God woke me up today, and I get to enjoy this day, and I get to
Yeah.
take a deep breath, and I get to be. Um, yeah, yeah. We don't nearly do it enough.
So one of my clients recently shared with me that he and his wife get to their little coffee nook and every morning they just start calling out things they're grateful for.
I love
And they
that.
start the day with just things that come to their mind. And what I started recently is something called morning prayer or morning pages, which is this concept from this lady in the 70s, I think. And a lot of people have followed it. It's just you sit in front of a journal and you just write for a few pages, just whatever comes to your mind. And
Incredible.
I think that's part of the slowing down to speed up the idea of stillness. I think that is lacking in our society, especially now with all the, AI and, social media and all that, we get barraged by so much information.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
It my my wife and I have started trying to start the practice of getting up and having coffee together and talking about just how we're feeling. Not
Mm.
talking about the job for the day or what needs to get done, but just talking about, hey, how are you feeling today? Are you
Yeah.
feeling anxious? Are you feeling, there's enough going on in the world right now that there's, a lot of anxious people getting up in the morning, a lot of, waking up triggers. How are you feeling? How do you get back into the being of who you are? And it's, we started, I think, last week, and we'll get better. I'm sure we'll get better at it, but just that idea of what are you feeling?
Yeah.
What's your being feeling today? I don't think we talk nearly enough about our feelings either. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, had
Well,
fun
that's
with
season 7.
seven. Feelings. Very good.
Um, so I think the other part of this is
Well,
I love this definition of doing is the doing part of identity is how you express your being,
yeah,
not how you prove it.
yeah, yeah,
So I loved how you defined your identity was started in the foundation of the being and then
yeah.
moved into the definition of I'm an engineer and I do
Right.
and your values.
Yeah,
That is a great illustration of the doing is how we express our being and it's not how you have to prove it.
correct. Yep, yep,
And we've talked a lot in this season around all the doing parts of our identity, which there's many, but one, the big buckets of our doing part that we talked a lot about, which will help us navigate our our world,
yep,
is our strengths and competencies, our values and what the things that bring us alive in life,
yep.
um, our purpose and developing and clarifying a purpose statement, which we'll get to, and our story, our narrative identity. And we spend 80-90% of our time in the story identity of all these false identities.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
what we just talked about, what you just shared, is starting the day and starting to get in the habit and embed the story that is not of our false identity, but of our true identity.
that's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Because I would go back to your boxes metaphor, but at the end, all we have is the story, right? And so we might as well spend the time writing the story that we're put on this earth to write, and not someone else's version of our story.
Yeah. Or even not only someone else's, but also the story we've made up or the brain's made up.
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah. Yeah, I guess if you go back to IFS, you could take you could take those as somebody else's writing the story. But yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
not our true self writing the story, somebody else. Yep,
Right. Internal family systems and all the different parts in us.
yeah, yeah,
Just all these things, all the leadership books that I read tend to lean towards self-leadership. I've just read a few more since last month, and they all common denominator, recognize the limiting beliefs,
yeah,
make sure that you don't listen to the story in your head that's made up, and all this stuff we've talked about. So the reason why I love the acronym INSPIRE for obvious reasons because what it means, but also the I and starting with that is so great to start with identity. Because I think no matter where we go, spiritually, physically, intellectual, all the other stuff that's going to follow, and I need your help to keep us, both of us, it all
yeah,
starts with the I. It all starts with the identity.
yeah, for sure, for sure. Cool.
Um, you kind of stole the show with that morning. I mean, apply this session,
Yeah,
to apply what are the takeaway really is that can we hold our heart and spend a few seconds or minutes in the morning just checking in with our identity and both identities, check in with our being part of our identity and just the stillness of I, I belong to you or whatever it needs to be said, and the doing part, which I have been trying to do more lately, which is writing out, hey, these are my 3 values. And just by writing them out or looking at them or reviewing them in the morning helps me to navigate my day to say, I'm going to look. like a treasure hunt for today, for whimsy, for inspiration, for embracing, whatever that looks like for me. And it's been fun. So lately, that's how I've kind of tried to reconnect or connect deeper to my I doing part of my identity.
I love that. What can I ask either yesterday or today, what whimsy have you found? I know that's a big one, but for you.
Well, it's so much tied up with my wife and I. I mean, just the laughter
Okay.
we have and just the lighthearted, funky. I mean, yesterday we were in church and we were trying to do this communion thing. You got to pull off this thing with the juice and I don't know. And it's like she's trying to do it, she's fumbling and she like stumbles and falls into me. And it's like that's just whimsical, right? I mean, when you can just be silly and funny,
Yeah,
So that's probably an example, yeah.
I love that.
Well,
That's
and our dog Scout's pretty whimsical. I mean, she doesn't mean, I don't, she has no idea what the word means, but no, that's not true. I'm convinced that she knows words and that she's pretty bright, but yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Um, Anything else today? I think the invitation today is again, how to check in with the being part of our identity, how to align with the doing part of our identity, and what that looks like for you in your morning routine.
Yeah. Yeah. I only thing I can add to it is when I've done that and um it evokes so much emotion. I don't know if you could hear it in my voice, but it almost brings
Oh
me to
yeah.
tears. It
Yeah.
almost, you could it really evokes a ton of emotion and if you got the courage to do it, do it. It's well worth it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Cool.
Anything else?
I think we nailed it. I think we landed the plane.
Yeah. So
Yep.
next time we'll intro the N and navigate, and we'll start after what does that look like? How to navigate the world that we're in, which is very complicated and filled with bitterness and sweetness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right, brother.
All
Good
right.
seeing you.
Good seeing you too, but Drew. It's always a blast. See ya.
Bye.
Bye.